Well, good evening again, Nate. This is my second attempt at recording video on the computer, and I've had to make a few little changes. Notice the subdued lighting in the background and my green screen on the chair. Also, I had some problems with the last video with the microphone. It wasn't very loud, so I've replaced the camera microphone with a Zoom pocket recorder, and I think it works better. It's definitely got a better audio quality. Hopefully I won't be quite as nervous this time, because I lost track of what I was talking about in a few places on the last video. Yeah, my green screen behind me consists of a tablecloth. Sometime in the future I'm going to try and upgrade to a true multicolour experience. The interesting thing about the Zoom microphone that I'm using, when I first tested it I had problems getting the frequency to be recognised on the computer, so I had to play around with it a bit in Windows to get it to work properly. Initial recording attempts were shifting the audio frequencies up about 3 semitones, which I can't understand why that is. But yeah, the sound quality should be better with this one. Beer time. The last video I got a thumbs down on it, so I must be doing something right. In your most recent video on the Ventilator track, yeah, you mentioned the clocks. It was sort of one of those coincidences. The pocket watch samples I've got on my next track that's coming out, if you listen carefully you could be forgiven for thinking that it's running backwards in places. It's got a very strange sounding mechanism, and it's not helped by me glitching it up later on in the track. So I'm using fracture to mangle it a bit. Hopefully that will work out okay. We'll see. You mentioned money in your video, popularity. My music, and I suspect you think the same way and feel the same way about yours, is sort of niche. It's not going to appeal to the mainstream radio listener. There's going to be no golden payday at the end of the rainbow. I'm sorry to dampen your expectations, but I'm happy with that. I don't put these tracks up on SoundCloud and expecting to make money. I mean, most of them I put up are downloadable anyway, unless they've already been specifically written for a purpose. But you know, maybe the ambient online compilations. In that case, any proceeds from sales go to the website anyway. So after an undefined period of time I might remix a track and release it on an album on Bandcamp, at which point I'll turn off the download option on the SoundCloud. It might be a backwards way of doing things, but it only brings in about $30 a year, but you know, $30 is better than nothing, and it helps to pay for the odd VST. Although the last one I bought was Zebra 2, so it's going to go nowhere near paying for that. Although I did get it second hand at KVR, so I didn't have to pay the full price for it. I've wanted Zebra 2 for about 10 years, or Zebra for about 10 years, and I just never got round to buying it. And I've had it for a couple of months. I still haven't used it. Hopefully that will change in the next couple of months. But something I've just started playing around with is granular processing. So I kind of like what I heard there, so I might be doing a bit of that soon as well. Yeah, so $30 a year. It's not a revenue generator, it's just a little bit of pocket money to put towards running costs, which are much higher than that anyway. I mean, the first album I released was because it was just one of those bucket list things. It was something I've wanted to do before it was too late, was to release an album, and I've sort of got the bug a little bit, and I've got 6 of them released now. I'm sort of working on another one, but I probably won't finish that till the end of next year, so I'll continue doing it because it seems like the right thing to do. And once a track's available on Bandcamp, I can then write it off and say, right, that's finished, and I don't have to go back and remix it anymore, because that's like a never-ending cycle of repeat, refine, art for art's sake. Right? You were mentioning something about physical media, and with that BioShock book, like a tangible, tactile thing. Books, paintings, vinyl, cassettes, CDs. I think eventually they're all going to become things of the past. Subscription models become more prevalent. Eventually the originals will be forgotten and the new media will control everything, and that's sad, but that's not the end of it, because once they've got control, history will be rewritten. You can rely on that. More beer. Rick was saying he didn't hear any prog rock in my tracks, and that's probably true. I might come back to that later on. I've got this is all a bit jumbled, all these responses. I'm just trying to reorder them as I go. Prog rock, yeah, that was my epiphany when I was about 15 years old. Up until then I've been listening to radio, pop music, because that was the only access I had to music, really. My family wasn't really musical. My father liked classical music. My mother liked to listen to sort of big band stuff, jazzy dance music. It wasn't really my thing. So I was listening to stuff that was in the singles charts up until about the age of 15, and then I went away on a holiday with some guys from the school and discovered Tubular Bells by Mike Oldfield, and that was when everything changed for me. That got me into, prog rock bands like Genesis, a bit later Rush, Frank Zappa, King Crimson, Gentle Giant, Joni Mitchell. I don't call her prog rock, but she's just a musician, a great musician who writes really good songs, and she's got a great voice. Some other bands I like with Japan, XTC, Future Sound of London, although they came much later. Ozric Tentacles, Radiohead and Porcupine Tree, again they're more recent. And of course Tangerine Dream, who I discovered around 1975-76. Their work through the 70s and then into the early 80s was really good, and then I just thought they went downhill a bit, you know, they lost their soul. Possibly related to the lineup changes, possibly related to the computerization of what they were doing. I don't know, or maybe they just got old like me. But Tangerine Dream, I mean, they made some great albums. They got Phaedra and Rubicon, Ricochet, and some others after that. But there was one album in particular which had an influence on me, but not until much, much later. And that was Zeit, which I consider to be the first dark ambient album. When I first heard it, I thought, "Ooh, this is strange." I wasn't crazy about it. And this again was 1976 when I first heard that. And then it was probably 20 years later, maybe a bit more than that, when I started actually getting it, you know, because I discovered the future sound of London and the more modern music and the Frippatronics and the, you know, Robert Fripp's Soundscape series of CDs. So it was probably late 90s when I started not really getting into ambient, but listening to it a bit, you know. And then it was probably about 2014 when I really started making ambient music, although I'm not a really big listener of ambient music. I don't listen to it all the time. I still listen to mainly prog rock. In fact, I was listening to Gentle Giant earlier today, some old bootleg CD which didn't have the best sound quality, but it doesn't really matter. I can live with poor sound quality if the music's good. Anyway, prog rock. Rick says he can't hear the prog rock in my music, and I think he's probably right. I started out with a prog rock background, having played in some prog bands back in the late 70s. And when I started, I sort of hoped that I'd be bringing a bit of prog to some of this stuff. But yeah, it's not really there, but I suppose I've got a sense of melody though, so I might have carried that through with me. But the overall resultant, musical output probably doesn't contain that many prog elements. You mentioned Prison Lawyer in your video. That this is just jumping to a completely unrelated subject. I'll take it that's a reference to the Shawshank Redemption. Something that kind of something that came up was creating music based on real experience. Most of my tracks, certainly in the early days, 2009, probably up until 2013, 14, they weren't really based on experience. They were based on nothing at all other than making it up as I went along. And then if I put a title to it, it would be some sort of in-joke inside my head, maybe based on some of the patch names that I used on the tracks. my sense, or something funny that had happened during the recording. There wasn't really anything there, and then I started writing the occasional track where I had some idea in my head, not the music necessarily, but maybe I was upset with something that was in the news, or something that happened to me, or so. Yeah, there's an increasing presence of outside influence, non-musical, in my music these days, although it's still not, I wouldn't call it regular. Infrequent, that's a good word. So yeah, some of these are abstract origin tracks. Naming them can be problematic, but I usually get a solution that suits me. So, but yeah, Ventilator, that was written. That was the second attempt I had at writing a track after my father died. And the first one, it was an okay track, Absent, but it didn't really convey any of the feelings I had at the time. At the end of the day, it was okay to listen to, but it just didn't fit. And then Ventilator, I started work on this track, and it wasn't designed to commemorate a death in the family or anything like that, but after I got the fourth note down for that track, it just took on a life of its own, and boom, it was finished in a day. And I just immediately, within 15-20 minutes of starting work on it, I knew what it was about. It was the one. It's funny how that goes. I can't really explain it. I'm glad it happened, but I don't know how it happened, it's just uncanny. Your video that you made, I can't remember the title of it, with the thugs, that worked out really well. It was, it was completely different to my original inspiration, but was equally effective at conveying this feeling of complete hopelessness. So I dug around, you showed me the book, because I was wondering where those thugs came from. They kind of fascinated me. And when I was digging around various Bioshock sites, I saw this Arcadia is mentioned there, and I thought, ooh, what? That's a coincidence. Because one of the tracks I wrote was called Et in Arcadia Ego, which is based on a painting by an artist called Nicolas Poussin about 400 years ago. So that, I thought, okay, Arcadia, and I let that one go. But we'll come back to that later, maybe. But yeah, when I saw the thugs in your video, that immediately made me think of the Cenobites in Clive Barker's original Hellraiser film. And looking at some of your earlier YouTube videos, I can see that you're familiar with them, although I hope not on a first name basis. So yeah. That was a great film, by the way, Hellraiser. I really enjoyed that. It was I thought it was quite different to anything else that was around at that time. That was 87, so a sort of offbeat feel about it. It wasn't quite normal, and that some of Clive Barker's books are like that as well, especially the early ones, the books of blood. Lots of short stories. It wasn't doing the same thing as other people at that time. I haven't kept up with his recent work, so I don't know what he's doing now, but yeah, Hellraiser was a great film. Earworms, we've talked about that. They drive me crazy. They really... Oof. There are numerous pop songs, you know, that get into the charts over time, and there's one by a band called Black Lace called Agadoo. Oh, it's awful. And whenever that gets played, or whenever I start thinking about it, it's got this really inane chorus that just drives me mental. And once I've got it in my head, I can't get rid of it. I get the same thing while I'm writing a new track. The melody gets stuck in my head, and even if it's not melodic either, you know, it still gets into your head, and you're going to sleep with it ringing. So what I do is I think of Agadoo, and that can quite often flush everything else out of my head. Unfortunately, it does have the side effect of driving me crazy, but sometimes you need to have a break from that composition process, and getting a tune like that into your head is the best way of doing it, although there is a lot of suffering that will go along with that sort of activity. What were we talking about? Entropy. Bad management, yes. Of course it is. Entropy is accelerated by poor management. And I mean, that's something that happens in everyday life for everybody. I mean, for instance, today I had to clear out the guttering and the downpipes at the top of the house because they were just completely clogged with moss, which gathers there as a result of rolling off the roof. So I might have to invest in some roof treatment to slow down the proliferation of moss, because getting up there 20 feet up in the air and clearing out downpipes is becoming too repetitive. But there's a bit of everyday household entropy. At the end of the day, I just wonder, will poor management accelerate the end of the universe? An odd thought, maybe, but I wouldn't be surprised. When you stir your rice pudding, Septimus, the spoonful of jam spreads itself round, making red trails like the picture of a meteor in my astronomical atlas. But if you stir backwards, the jam will not come together again. Indeed, the pudding does not notice and continues to turn pink just as before. Do you think this is odd? That is a quote from Tom Stoppard's play Arcadia, which I discovered whilst doing some Googling on entropy. So, another coincidence. Yes, entropy is all, and Arcadia are more common references than I thought. Yeah, so that again, I mentioned that Faders album. There's 4 tracks on that, and track 3 is that Et in Arcadia Ego, which was written basically influenced by this painting that I mentioned earlier on, but it was also part of a sequence of tracks which was written with the concept of a false advertising, broken contracts, blah blah blah, that sort of thing. It's a disappointment. There's a bit of a subtext to that track, and the entropy clause was the final revelation at the end of the album, which it meant something to me. It's probably my warped imagination. You've mentioned drones and choirs as being a good combination. I agree with that one. There's something about the sound of the human voice that sort of, it's got a really primitive feel. I mean, it was the first musical instrument, so it's been around for a long time. My first experience with that sound in rock music was Mike Oldfield's Ommadawn album in 1975. A couple of minutes into side 1, and these female vocals, they're not singing out any lyrics, they're just making those vowel sounds, and it just really sounded great to me. So I've always had that fascination with that kind of sound, so that's where that solo vocal sound in the entropy chorus that appeared a couple of times came from. I just really wanted to emulate something like that. In fact, Ventilator's scheduled to get a bit of a remix with a softer sounding choir patch, but it ain't going to be happening anytime soon. Not this year anyway. Contracts. Oh yeah. No, I'd never had a really bad experience with contracts, but when I was writing the entropy clause, there was a story on the BBC News about somebody who bought something or bought some service from some company, and something went wrong, and the company just refused to support the guy. So yeah, it just bugged me, that people stick all this advertising on the television, and it's all hunky-dory, lovely-jubbly, and they're trying to sell you stuff that really you shouldn't be buying in the first place anyway, most of the time. But sometimes people have to buy these products, and then when things don't work the way that they're intended, you can face a real battle to persuade the people that have sold you this stuff that it's their fault, and that sort of bugs me. People not honouring their responsibilities, and I don't know. So that was a sort of subtext to the entropy clause, which started as a science-based piece of dark ambient, but then about halfway through it I got this sort of supernatural story in my head, and it fitted in with other tracks that I had, and that's when the idea of that album came out. So it's had a really strange birth, that track. I think Bradley's got me confused with somebody else. I'm only a moderator at Ambient Online, and I'm pretty sure that marching music is not going to go down too well with the members or the site operators, even for a couple of days, let alone 6 months. Whatever you're being paid isn't enough. Masterson, that was a good one. I don't know anybody of that name, except, you know, the girl in Goldfinger, the movie, who was found dead on the bed covered in gold. That was her surname. So I can always find some sort of movie angle if I dig deep enough, but I actually knew that one anyway. I'm a sad bastard. Yeah, contracts. I don't have any aspirations towards fame, fortune, and any of those things. You know, celebrity. I'm quite content with my little corner of the universe, where I can release an occasional track with no pressure. I don't think I want to do it for a living. It would take a lot of the fun out of it, you know. I get the occasional request from a net label, and sometimes I'll follow it up and something will get released, but that's as far as it goes for me, and that's fine. I'm happy with that. Don't need all the bling and the plastic surgery. That's a big no-no. What did Donald say? He said, time doesn't make somebody a good artist. Well, that's true. It takes lots of things to become a good artist. You need time, obviously, because that's a resource that's in short supply. But yeah, there's plenty of other things that you need to do. You're not defined purely by time. Although I started, speaking for myself, I started in 2009, but I've been listening to music, you know, as an avid music listener since the mid-70s. So I've been doing music for 45 years, looking at it that way. You know, I'd hope that during that listening phase that went on for a very long time, well, some sort of subliminal learning process was taking place. I'm probably not the best person to speak with any authority on what it takes to become a good artist or musician. I'm not an expert. I've got views. Everybody's got an opinion, but mine's no more valid than anybody else's. This is something, yeah. There was words like beloved and detested. Now I think, oh dear, that's a minefield, that one. Those sort of words not really suitable when relating to communication situations that don't take place personally. You know, a lot of people, they can make comments on various fora, social media, or even in emails, but they're making those comments more often than not without any real contact, and those comments can assume an identity and character which probably would not happen in a real life situation, whether that's by design or by accident. It doesn't really matter though. You've got to be very careful about reacting to communications that, especially with people you've never met, because it can be hard to, you know, express yourself clearly using electronic communications. It's very hard to convey emotion when you're just scribbling some words onto a tweet or, you know, onto a forum, or even sending an email at work. I mean, I've known people being fired from their jobs for sending inappropriate emails. Even with a telephone, you know, it's not really personal. You're talking to somebody, yeah, sure, but you're not face to face with them, and so you're going to have to use your voice, which is a more effective medium than a keyboard or a typewriter or something, but or a written letter. But yeah, even on the telephone, things get misunderstood. It's quite frequent. You know, you're phoning up somebody in a professional situation, and you're detailing your requirements, and they're saying, okay, I can respond to that, and we're going to do this, and that. But quite often it all goes wrong. So yeah, in those cases, you need a combination of written word, verbal communication, but face to face is the way to do it. And I think sadly that's becoming a thing of the past as well. Wires and time delays seem to give people some kind of justification for behaving unreasonably. That was the point I was trying to make. It's sort of dehumanising. And I'm not talking about Stanley Kubrick movies here, although there are some very strong parallels. There was one point in your last video where you said, oh God, what did you say? You don't get, people don't recognise the struggles of the unknown artist. And I was thinking of a quote from Frank Zappa's Roxy and Elsewhere album, "Nothing is what I want." Yeah. I'm saying that, yeah, attitudes to music creation, yeah, my family think I'm strange, and they just leave me to it because they just can't relate to me wanting to do it, or the actuality of me having done it, that my music means nothing to them. And that's not unusual. I know a few other people, you know, that you're a weirdo if you're a musician. That's it. I've got, yeah, a few friends with more musical backgrounds, you know, and they're more understanding, but by the same token, they're highly unlikely to to like anything I ever make. And I'm okay with that. That's not a problem. That quote from Brian Eno was that ambient music must be as ignorable as it is interesting. Yeah, and yeah, I'm with you on that. Can you imagine trying to make an entropy clause light that's ignorable? What's the point? No, I'm with you. It wouldn't work. And I know a lot of people who agree with that. And by the same token, I know a lot of people who disagree with it. So you're never going to get a consensus on it. If I'm listening to a good piece of ambient music, like Tangerine Dream Zeit, that's a dark ambient. It's the original. You can't ignore that. It's like, it's not in your face, but has to be listened to because the atmosphere is like chilling. Another of your callers said Audacity, it's awful, and I've heard a lot of people complaining about that GUI, but I've been using it for probably about 15 years, and it's been around longer than that, and I know the GUI's kind of old-fashioned, but it's great for doing what I need, and the fact that it's now got VST support is really neat, so you can bring in reverbs and stuff like that. You don't have to work in a DAW as long as you're using audio. And once in a while it's good to get out of the DAW and do something different. So I was playing around with this granular processor earlier on, and I'm thinking, I can load that into Audacity. So that's something I'm going to play with in the next few months, if I get the time. Right. Oh, and somebody mentioned Keeping Up Appearances. I haven't watched that for over 20 years, but I don't know if you're familiar with the character Onslow. He's one of my personal heroes, so anytime he's in it, it's certainly worth watching. I do take the opportunity to watch reruns of Fawlty Towers though, anytime it's on TV, because it's great comedy. It's not politically correct, but it's funny as hell. Right, I think that's time to wrap it up. That's been about 40 minutes. It's 2:30 in the morning, and I want to get some shut-eye. I shall talk to you again later. Bye for now.